everyone? This is Mr. Springston, also known as Bacon Bits of History, and today we're going to do a little bit of campfire cooking. What we're going to do is we're going to cook ourselves up a stew, we're going to cook some biscuits, we're going to cook a little bit of dessert. Now, what is step one with our campfire cooking? It's getting the fire going, right? No, it's more important. The potato. Alright, so what we're going to do with our potato is we're going to peel it, get our skin off of there so that we can use it in there. Now, sometimes you can use stuff with the skin, just for this recipe. We're just peeling them up just like we would if we're going to mash them or boil them. These ones we're going to stick in a stew. Make sure we get all the skin off. That potato is pretty good, ready to go in, so we're going to cut them up. Now, fun fact about peeling potatoes, my great-grandmother used to be able to peel a potato all in one go. She'd start at the end like this and keep going all the way around in a circle so that the entire skin came off without her having to lift the peeler. I can't do that, partially because I'm too impatient, but because I haven't peeled quite enough potatoes, and because I generally end up eating parts of potatoes halfway through cooking them. They're great with just a little sprig of salt. Now this potato has a few little bits of brown pieces. I'm just going to cut those out just so we don't have to deal with the yuckiness. We'll leave that for some animal to find. Alright, this one's ready to go in. There we go. Potatoes are all set. Now, on to our next step. These peelings, they go straight into the compost. I'm going to run those right over there. Next step is getting our fire going. Alright, so our next step is where we actually get our fire started. Now, we could use all sorts of old school methods to get this going. We could use flint and steel, we could use a pump, we could use the bow drill, but we're going to cheat today. And we're just going to use some matches and some really dry wood. These true strike anywhere, which means just along the side of the box. We'll see what we can get going. And of course, the match breaks on the first try. Let's try again. All right, we're probably not going to be able to, so because our wood is really wet, for some strange reason, it may have rained about the last 30 days, we're going to cheat today. We're going to use charcoal and matches and newspaper. Alright, so just adding a little more easy burn to there. Make sure we get our fire nice and strong. Now, this wood is really smoky. What does that tell us about the wood? Getting the fire going. Took a little bit longer than expected. Wood was pretty wet, but we got it going. Some nice coals going in there. Once this gets going, I think we'll probably be ready to just about get started. All right, now that our fire is ready, we're gonna do our next step, roll our sleeves up. We're about to start using our Dutch oven kettle. I'm going to put just a little bit of oil in there. Make sure things don't burn, because we're going to add our meat in and we're going to brown our meat nice and low over the fire. We're also going to make sure we add our onion. So we'll add just a tiny bit of oil here. Alright. Good, that looks pretty good. Alright, here's our meat. One steak cut up, tenderized a little bit. Ready? We're going to get that browned a little bit. And of course, can't forget our onions. Key part of any dish. Alright. Put the onions around. Get our meat. Now, getting this on is our issue. So we have, for me, my favorite is our welding gloves. Makes it nice and easy. Alright, we're going to add our kettle on. Let's see. Of course, it is being difficult. There we go. Just about right. We're going to add our lid, let it brown a little easier, so we can also fan our fire. There we go. Now, we wait for our meat to brown. Alright, we let it sit for a minute. We'll take our lid off. Alright, that's starting to brown up nicely. Get our fork. Right there, that's how I like my steak. All right, our meat is looking pretty nice and brown. Once we've gotten rid of all that sort of red, we're pretty set. Our onions are starting to smell those wonderful aromas now. Yep. All right, they look about right, so we're going to add our water. Now, this is one of the parts we have to be very careful, because what happens when water is rapidly heated? Steam and smoke. So we're very careful about this. All right, we've got our water added in. We see it starting to sort of boil. So we're going to put our lid on and let her cook. All right, so we're going to let that cook for about half an hour. We got to watch it to make sure it doesn't boil dry. I think it's good. Alright, so we've let it cook for a good long time. It's got to a nice boil. It smells really good. We're going to take off our lid. We're going to add in our potatoes and carrots and add in a little more water. There's our potatoes and our carrots. Potatoes that we did up first. Let them sit. Cheat, use some tools. Oh! All right. Add in our last little bit of water here. All right. I'm going to stir that up with our wooden spoon just a little bit. Make sure nobody's sticking to the bottom. Nobody's burning on one side. Oh, those onions are looking mighty good. Mighty good. All right. Not bad. Perfect. All right, so we want to keep it at just below a boil. Nice little simmer, which is right where we're at now. All right, so now it's time to light up our little brazier so we can get our dessert rolling. It's loaded up with charcoals. See what that does. This will be where our dessert cooks up. Pretty soon it'll be time to get our biscuits going. Alright, so it's dessert time. So our first step is I'm going to grease our kettle here. Use some nice buttered Crisco. There we go. That way it doesn't bake onto the bottom. We've got dinner cooking up right there. That should be good. Alright. So we've got our pre-measured ingredients right here for ours. We're going to mash this sort of butter in, make it into a nice sort of battery consistency with the fork. Now I found when making pie crust or sort of any dessert crust, using a fork works a lot better than a whisk or anything else. Makes it so it's not too smashed up and gives it that just nice fine consistency. When we say we want a battery consistency, we're not thinking like a AA battery, but we're thinking of like a batter, like cake batter or cookie batter, or not batter up either. Alright, that looks good. We're going to add our egg, milk, and our vanilla in. Set that down so I can add ourselves a capful, just a capful of good old vanilla extract. There we go. Then we're going to remix our batter. Get it nice consistency. Get it so there's no clumps. We don't want to have lumpy batter. The only thing worse than lumpy batter is lumpy gravy. right, looks pretty good. So, we're going to add our peaches. Nothing's better than home canned peaches. Straight into our kettle. All right, and then put our batter on top. Let me grab my spatula. There we go. All right, ready to put it on our little brazier. Let me actually swipe that down just a little bit so it's a little more even. There's dessert, ready to go. All right, here's our rosemary. Let's get a little bit of it for our stew. That ought to do. Let's find some parsley. All right, let's pick some parsley. There we go. Looks perfect. Let's go add it to the stew. All right, so it's time to add the parsley and the rosemary that we just picked into our stew. Also check if we got enough water. Oh, it's looking quite good. There we go. Stir up. You know what I think it needs? Some celery. Let's add some celery. Cut it up, and we can add it in. It's easier to just break up. Add just a little more water. And we'll let her simmer a little bit more. All right, let's take a look at our dessert. It's smelling pretty good. It might be cooking a little bit too fast. That shouldn't be too much of a problem. All right, let's make some biscuits to go along with our stew. So we got our dry ingredients here. We have our milk, we have our shortening. So let's get this mixed up first. There we go. Reset. Get our biscuits nice and mixed in. All right, that looks pretty good. I think it's time from here out to start kneading the bread. So what is kneading? Kneading when you use your bare hands. So I have a little flour here. I'll flour my hands up. Then I'm going to start massaging the bread together. This helps get out all your frustrations of the day when you're kneading the bread. It also makes you much better with bread. See how much quicker it came together when I started kneading? I love kneading bread. I think I'm going to add just a little bit more flour here. Get this bread going a little more. In the meantime, our dinner and our dessert are still cooking over on their respective fires. Alright, that's pretty good. Since this is baking powder bread, it doesn't need as much kneading as some other breads. So let's put it on our plate here. You know, I could probably eat this entire biscuit here myself, but I'm going to make them into much smaller, more bite-sized morsels. So we're getting it out to about 1/2 inch in thickness. Then we're going to use our favorite tool, our biscuit cutter, to cut our biscuits. There is our first biscuit. Let's grab the lid of our Dutch oven so we can put those on there and get them going. Alright, so let's use our key tools. We're going to use the lid of our Dutch oven to bake our biscuits. So before we do, we're going to use a little bit of Crisco as our grease. So we don't want our biscuits stuck and burned on here. That wouldn't be very good. There we go. Yeah, just a little bit more. And now we've used up all the circle parts, so this bread that we've made is useless, right? No, absolutely not. We just reform it. We can get as much out of here as we want, and we intend to not waste food. Now, there's all sorts of fancy designs you could use to make these. You could put them with little edging, little other fun things on them. You could even make them into breakfast roll shapes, or you could even add things like cheese to it. Whatever you like. You want to add blueberries? That'd make a great breakfast meal. You're really only limited by your creativity and what science works when you're cooking. Alright, this is what dough we have remaining, so we're going to make it in a silly shape. Some of you might be thinking it's a tombstone. No. It's a Clovis Point arrowhead. That'll be my first biscuit. Alright, there are our biscuits. Before we put our biscuits back on the fire, I had an idea. Let's make some gravy. So we'll use our pan. We'll dump our water out here. From the pond, straight back to the pond, after it goes through the pipes in the house and everything. But what we'll do is we'll use our pan, and I think to get some of our juice from our stew. And this should be enough for our gravy. Now, how do we make gravy? Gravy is one of the most difficult, no, it's probably one of the easiest dishes to make. So let's see how we do it. The key ingredient is we already have our broth, our stew broth, or our stock, and then we have some cornstarch. We're going to mix the cornstarch in, and we're going to make sure our gravy doesn't get lumpy. Now, there may be a few bits of stew or meat in there, but any good gravy is going to have that sort of as a base. Here we go. Now, I'm very particular when I make my gravy that I stir with a spoon. Some people may find the sound of a spoon stirring on a metal pot unbearable, but I find it works better. Family tradition this way. All right, I've got our gravy off to a good start, so I'm going to put the biscuits back on top of the Dutch oven so that they're going to cook on up for us. Looks like our stew is coming along nicely. So now, we set them right there. They cook. Once they're starting to brown up, they'll be pretty good. Let's check on our dessert because it smells like it's almost ready. Oh, I believe it is ready. That's perfect because we can take our dessert off and we can cook our gravy on the little brazier. So I'm going to set this over here. All right, so since we got our dessert cooked, I'm going to put our gravy on here. And we'll let the gravy cook up. And a little get more thickening. It's thick, but it's not quite thick enough. And you may notice that, yes, there is a brick on the brazier. Now, that's not just there because the bees sound perfect together or as a fashion statement. That's there because the brazier seems to cook a little too fast and it didn't want to burn the peaches or the gravy. That helps slow it down a little bit. We're going to stir our gravy here. We got to give it a nice, good stir. And on the biscuits, we're waiting for them to start noticing to brown on the bottom until we flip them over. And then we'll flip them so they both get both sides cooked. Now, I'll be honest, this is what I consider the hardest part of the cooking because the dessert is done and I can smell it. The stew is starting to get done and I can smell it, and I can smell the gravy. And it's very difficult to sit here and keep continuing to cook without starting to eat, which is, of course, my favorite part of the whole meal experience. Buns are ready, stew's ready, gravy's hot. Let's eat.